Imagine for a moment that you're reading a beautifully bound, complex 500-page novel.
Right, something you've really invested your time into.
Exactly. It's taken you on this incredible journey through vivid landscapes and, profound character development. But then, because the final chapter happens to contain a tragic twist, you just close the cover.
You just give up on it.
Yeah, you throw the entire book in the trash and declare the story completely worthless.
Which is crazy to think about.
It is. I mean, it sounds absurd when we talk about a book, yet we do this with our own lives every single day. Welcome to this deep dive into the source material. Today, we are exploring a profoundly moving theme drawn directly from this week's sermon by our pastor.
And it is such a heavy, resonant theme.
It really is. We are looking at our intense, almost overwhelming human obsession with how things end. And beautifully, how God lovingly shatters our expectations of what a successful ending is actually supposed to look like.
It is a joy to share this space with you today.
Yeah.
And I really want to set our intention right from the start.
Please do.
Our goal here is not, some intellectual review of bullet points. I want you to think of this as an opportunity for the three of us, you listening, me and my co-host, to simply sit together in a quiet room and reflect.
I love that. Just a safe, warm space.
Exactly. We want to journey toward a profound realization, toward wonder, and ultimately toward a deep release of the heavy burdens you might be carrying right now. We're going to look at the human condition, the ways we constantly exhaust ourselves, and how God offers an entirely different, incredibly freeing lens for our stories.
We really do exhaust ourselves, don't we? I mean, the narrative begins right at the core of that exhaustion. As the pastor shared with us, we are people who relentlessly ask, how will this end?
Always looking for the finish line.
Always. We look at our careers, our families, our ministries, and we ask, will this succeed? What is the final outcome going to be? We are entirely focused on the final result rather than the actual process of living.
And there is a profound psychological reason for that. We feel at ease only when we know how things will conclude. We simply cannot endure what is unfinished.
That is deeply wired into us, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Uncertainty makes us incredibly anxious because our brains often equate the unfinished with danger or failure.
Right. Being in progress just feels frustrating.
It does. Time spent without visible, measurable results feels terrifying to us. And to illustrate that heavy burden of demanding a perfect ending, we can look at those deeply poignant stories from the pastor's message about a recent visit to a nursing home.
Those stories were just haunting.
The imagery really stays with you. Taking the elevator up to the 4th floor, stepping out into a hall where about 20 people were sitting together watching an old movie.
Just a quiet, everyday scene.
Right. And there was an elderly woman, perhaps 90 years old, just sitting there.
And as the story goes, she smiled and said hello.
Yes. But as the visitor walked around the hall, every single time he passed by this woman, she kept saying, hello, hello.
Even when he walked past her, she would say it toward his back.
Exactly. It wasn't an active conversational greeting. It was this continuous, unending rhythm, a heavy, repetitive loop.
It sets such a profound, melancholic mood about the end of a long life's journey, doesn't it?
It truly does. It brings a rush of heavy emotions about what it actually means to near the end of our earthly timeline. And, alongside that image, there was another heartbreaking story.
The woman from Latin America?
Yes, the elderly woman from Latin America. She was holding on, weeping, and just lamenting her entire life. She declared that the ending of her life was an absolute failure.
Just a complete failure in her eyes.
Because her children did not love her. And most tragically, her grandson, whom she loved with all her heart, had recently taken his own life.
Oh, it's just devastating. She said that even though there had been beautiful seasons in her past, times when things went so well, times of real joy and connection, now at the very end of her life, everything had fallen apart.
She was judging her entire, complex, decades-long existence based solely on its tragic ending.
And that hits so close to home, because if you are listening to this right now and you have just gone through a painful divorce or a business you poured your very soul into just went bankrupt, your brain is probably screaming at you.
It's telling you that this ending makes everything a failure.
Yes. This ending makes my entire life a failure. We rush to write that final sentence. But why do we do that? Why do we instantly define our entire identity by a single broken relationship or a blocked path and assume, well, this must be who I am?
We do it because we mistakenly believe our worth is only validated by the final tally.
Right. The bottom line.
Exactly. When a relationship breaks, we don't say that relationship ended. We conclude, I am someone who cannot sustain love.
Oh, wow. That is such a harsh judgment.
It is. We are still in the absolute middle of the process of living, yet we judge ourselves as finished products. But here's where we encounter a jarring, completely countercultural truth from the pastor's message.
A completely different way to look at it.
Yes. When we look at how God actually measures a successful life, it is entirely different from our human anxiety. Look at the biblical example of Joshua. Read Joshua chapter 24, verses 29 through 33.
By every conceivable human standard, Joshua was the absolute peak of success.
He is the ultimate success story.
If you were drafting a resume of biblical leaders, his is absolutely flawless. I mean, he brought down the impregnable walls of Jericho.
One battle after battle.
Without fail. He completed the seemingly impossible conquest of Canaan, and he successfully distributed the promised land to the people.
If humanity were writing his biography, it would be this triumphant, sweeping narrative of victory, legacy, and, monumental accomplishment.
It would end with a massive monument, statues everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But how does God conclude the book of Joshua? God intentionally breaks our expectation of a triumphant climax. Verse 29 ends simply with, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died.
That's it. Just he died.
That is it. He died. And the text does not stop there. Verses 32 and 33 continue with a literal list of graves. It mentions burying Joseph's bones at Shechem, and then it plainly states that Eleazar, son of Aaron, also died.
Wow. We desperately want a moving, happy ending. We want the text to say, it went incredibly well, or his legacy lived on forever.
But God repeatedly, quietly says, he died. He was buried.
Well, wait, I have to push back on this a little because honestly, as the pastor shared this, it felt deeply uncomfortable.
It does feel uncomfortable.
If the ultimate end of all our striving, even for someone as faithful and victorious as Joshua, is just a grave, doesn't that just breed nihilism?
I can see why it feels that way.
Right. If it all just ends and he died, why should we bother trying to build anything good? Why do we put so much pressure on ourselves to do great things for God or our communities if the ending is always just death and burial?
That is a crucial question. And, that discomfort is exactly what the text is meant to provoke. It's not meant to breed nihilism. Rather, it acts as a mirror to separate faithful stewardship from ego-driven legacy.
Ego-driven legacy. That makes a lot of sense.
The grave is not the end of meaning, but it is the end of our personal control. It is showing us that no matter how greatly God uses you, no matter what massive, beautiful things you build, the final earthly outcome of your physical body is just a grave.
You are not meant to be eternal on this earth.
Precisely. And that directly confronts the modern church and our own personal egos when we try to create something that defies that simple sentence, he died.
Which brings us right into that incredibly poignant critique from the pastor's message regarding how we operate today.
It's so relevant.
It really is. We constantly try to manufacture a legacy that will last forever. You see this relentless drive for bigger church buildings, for more impressive, sprawling systems, for visible achievements we can point to and say, look at what I built.
Yes, and we need to understand the mechanism behind why we do this. When our personal identity becomes entangled with our output, we become terrified of irrelevance.
We just don't want to be forgotten.
Exactly. We subconsciously disguise our deep fear of being forgotten as God's will. That is why you see situations where churches will pressure people for offerings, squeezing resources out of the congregations just to endlessly expand a building.
And then they stand back and call it God's legacy.
It happens all the time.
And it absolutely extends beyond just the buildings, too. It affects how we treat our callings. Yeah. Ministry so often stops being a humble act of service and morphs into this fortified position of power.
It becomes about protecting territory.
Yes. You see churches beginning to resemble family businesses, where influence and roles are guarded and passed down to sons-in-law, and relatives. People cling to their pulpits or their leadership roles until the very end.
Acting as if the entire survival of the community depends solely on them.
Exactly. We justify this clinging to power with very spiritual-sounding language, which is such a devastating irony.
We do. We say things like, this is to preserve order, or this protects the church.
Or, I am just following God's will. It becomes completely normalized in our culture. But underneath all of that pious language, it is simply the arrogant illusion of the ego saying, I will remain, or only I can do this.
We try to build towers that reach to heaven to make a name for ourselves, and God shatters that entire illusion of human power with one quiet, inevitable sentence. He died.
It completely dismantles the ego. But if that is true, if our work inevitably ends in a grave and our personal empires will eventually crumble, how does the story possibly continue?
Where's the hope in that, right?
Right, because if the story ends at the grave, we are left right back in that place of despair. But from the pastor's message, we looked at God's promise to David in 2 Samuel 7:16. God tells David, "Your house and your kingdom will endure forever. Before me, your throne will be established forever."
It is an everlasting promise. But let us look at the historical reality that actually followed.
It wasn't so neat and tidy.
Not at all. David died. His kingdom eventually collapsed under the weight of poor leadership and sin. Israel divided into two, and then both halves fell completely to invading empires.
So to humanize, if you were reading the history books, it looks like a finished, failed story.
It looks as though God failed, and the promise was broken. The tragedy at the end of the book seemingly ruined the whole story.
But God does not evaluate life or his promises based on immediate human results.
Never.
The Bible never calls the fall of Israel God's failure. Look at Jeremiah 23:5, where the Lord declares, "The days are coming when I will raise up for David a righteous branch."
And later in Luke 1:32, speaking of Jesus, the angel says, "The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David."
So the profound realization here is that God does not finish everything in one person.
God does not depend on one individual's lifetime or success to complete his masterpiece. God continues his promise precisely on top of what looks like total, devastating failure.
That shifts our entire perspective. It makes me think of an analogy. In our daily lives, we constantly act like we have been assigned to engineer and construct an entire suspension bridge all by ourselves.
Oh, I like that image.
We stress over anchoring it, stringing the massive steel cables, paving the road. The stress of carrying that entire project is literally crushing us.
It's too much weight for one person.
It is. But the reality is, God is the engineer. We are just being asked to pour 1 cubic yard of concrete for one specific footing.
Just one small, faithful part.
Yes. If we truly understand that our role is just that single footing, the weight of the whole bridge comes off our shoulders. As the pastor highlighted from Hebrews 4:8, Joshua did not provide the ultimate rest. He was just a single stepping stone.
We are just a connection pointing forward.
Exactly.
That is a beautiful way to understand it. We are not the engineer. We are the concrete footing. Our plans, our intense efforts, even our deepest devotions, the things we believe simply must continue, can stop. We can come to an end.
And that's okay.
It is okay. Because God's work does not stop. We need to stop asking, how well can I accomplish this ending? And start asking, am I standing faithfully within the flow of what God is doing right now?
Which brings us to the real emotional climax of our reflection today.
Because we have to remember the ultimate truth of our condition. We are a people who literally cannot finish.
Joseph couldn't finish it, Moses couldn't finish it, Joshua couldn't, and David couldn't.
They all died without seeing the final completion of the promise.
But we are drawn to the climax of human history, to John 19:30, where Jesus Christ hangs on the cross. And he says, "It is finished."
He is the only one in all of history who could genuinely say that.
Jesus Christ alone completes the story. And looking at that cross, considering what he accomplished, the pastor asked a question that has the power to absolutely transform how you live every single day from this moment forward.
Such a powerful question.
He asked, why are you trying to finish it yourself?
Why are you trying to finish it yourself?
When you really let that question sink in, it is profoundly countercultural. We live in a society completely obsessed with hustle culture, with being a self-made success, with grinding until we drop.
Exhausting ourselves for a legacy.
The immense exhaustion of constantly trying to produce perfect results, of driving ourselves relentlessly until we collapse and declare ourselves failures. But when you hear that question, that weight just falls off.
Because God never once asked us to carry the burden of completing our own story.
We have been carrying a crushing weight that was never meant for our shoulders.
We really have. We push ourselves to the brink, saying, I have to make this happen. I have to fix this relationship. I have to make this business succeed perfectly. And when we inevitably encounter brokenness, we condemn ourselves.
We say, my life is a failure.
But God has never evaluated you by those results. Instead, God looks at you right now in the very midst of your messy, unfinished life and says, I am not finished yet.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, we want to leave you with the rich, practical life application from the pastor's message.
And it is wonderfully, mercifully simple.
Let it go. Lay down the obsession to finish everything perfectly. Lay down the heavy burden to prove your worth through your achievements.
You don't need to carry it.
Lay down the harsh judgment that calls you a failure just because you are facing a temporary setback or an unclear ending. You do not have to evaluate your entire life by how things look in this exact moment.
Choose, instead, to stand firmly on the footing of what Jesus has already finished.
Entrust your life to the author who is continuing the story.
You don't have to finish everything on your own. You just have to trust that the pages are still turning.
I want to leave you with one final, gentle thought to mull over today. Think about that specific area of your life where you recently gave up.
That place that feels totally unfinished.
Yeah, that place where you looked at the broken results and said, it's over, I failed. What if, right in that very place where you feel everything has fallen apart, God is simply turning the page to write the next chapter?
A chapter you don't have to write by yourself.
Exactly. A chapter of a story you don't have to finish on your own. Remember that beautiful, complex novel we talked about at the beginning?
Even with a tragic twist.
Right. Even if the chapter you're in right now feels like a tragic twist, please know this. The book isn't over. The author is still writing.
It has been a profound joy to share in this deep reflection with you.
It really has. Thank you for sitting with us, for taking this time to breathe, to reflect, and to release those heavy burdens. We are so grateful to have shared this space with you today. Take care and rest in the truth that it is finished.